Good afternoon. Today's video is on siblings. And I think that's a very interesting topic for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is I like what they say about me, right? Of course, if something fits for you, you're going to go, yeah, I like that theory. So, this is chapter 9 in our book. For those of you who are in family counseling, the Expanding Family Life Cycle, a gorgeous and very expensive, but I believe very profound textbook. And the chapter here is Siblings in the Life Cycle. Monica McGoldrick and Marlene Watson are the authors of chapter 9 for this. And I'm going to just kind of jump around and riff with this. So I'm not going paragraph by paragraph in case some of you, your eyes just glazed over. She's going to read me the textbook. Not really. I'm going to just riff around and play with it. So, spoiler alert, I'm the firstborn. Yeah, I'm the firstborn. And I really like all the things they say about firstborns and firstborn females. And so not only do I kind of like it, I have to honestly say I've thought of these things now for decades. Because like you were saying, when you first heard about it in your psychology classes, at first you're a little bit like, why should I believe this? And then you went, uh-oh. I want to believe it. Yeah.
It's kind of hard to deny that when they start listing things. And
yes.
All of them are right.
Yes. So the learning objectives for this chapter, I will read the objectives. So by the end of this chapter, those of you who are in family counseling, the 4th year social work elective, you should be able to explain the significance of sibling relationships through the family life cycle, describe the effects that age spacing has on sibling relationships, examine gender roles, discuss class, culture, race, and sibling patterns, list and describe characteristics associated with birth order, ponder what it means to have a disabled sibling and how that may change family dynamics. You should be able to examine sibling relationships and how those might impact on couple relationships. And I have to say some of the aspects there did fit for me in my life story and some haven't. So we'll ponder that in a minute. Discuss the challenges to sibling relationships during midlife and after the death of parents. And the last part is to list and describe rules for dealing with sibling relationships through the family life cycle. So, what I want to say about this is it's a really good chapter. Please take the time and read it. And I guess I'll just talk about myself, because I like talking about myself.
I know that topic well.
Yeah. And I invite each of you, for the purposes of some future quiz, to reflect on where you sit in these stories. So, let's see if I can find some of the examples. Well, the one for the firstborn, and it's not a surprise, the firstborn in sibling stories or in the family, of course, the firstborn often has only adults to hang out with, right? So if you're the firstborn, you're likely to spend more of your time or a high part of your time with mom and dad. This is often their first child, right? Assuming they don't have other partnerships, right? Because that's a separate thing. Like if you're the second marriage and you're the firstborn in the second marriage, that's a little bit different too. But anyway, the firstborn tends to be more of a leader. They tend to be more organized. They tend to be more thoughtful because their relationships, like I just said, are with adults. So often the adult, because you're the first time they've hung out with a little baby, they may expect more from you than they will from kid number 3 or 5 or 11. Often by kid 11, it's just like, as long as you don't die in the house, go. Because parents become more casual with each child in a way about how to parent. Often with the firstborn, oh, it burped, is that normal? Right? Oh, it pooed. How many times should it poo a day? And stuff like that. Because it's their learning experience. I'm their experiment. The firstborn is their experiment. But also what they're comparing you to is other adults. Right? Because that would be the natural thing, unless they've spent a lot of time finishing a degree in child development or something.
Yeah.
They're not going to know. So in general, I remember hearing about this. Someone had done some studies, and it's been duplicated subsequently, where they looked at Nobel Prize winners and famous authors, and they found there was a higher ratio of that collective group who were firstborns. Right? And I was like, yeah, I like this, I like this, I like this. So, some of the perhaps aspects of firstborns that may not always be popular in the world is we could be called bossy. If you have a younger sibling. So in my case, I had 2 younger siblings and they were both boys. And I've pondered that along the way. How did that link in with my feminism, right? I've often wondered, how did I ever get to have assertiveness skills or just thinking skills of it sounds boastful, but of a leader. I don't mean a leader as in, like, you know, leading people to war, but those situations often in my life where I'm in some study group or I'm with a group of friends, and then someone will say, oh, so what day are we going to meet? And then someone, I don't know, what day do you want to meet? So well, I don't know, you make a decision, and I start getting impatient. We could meet Tuesday or Thursday. I know everybody's schedule. We're going to meet either at 1 o'clock or 5 o'clock. Decide, right? Like, I get to in my brain. I don't always push it that far verbally. But I've seen that in a lot of study groups and a lot of situations in my life where I kind of, if you think of the sheepdog herder, you know those little dogs that nip at the sheep to get them to, you're going this way. You have to go this way because that's what we're doing. And I've seen that in myself. And I kind of like that about myself. I think it's an asset, but I also need to ponder it in relationships to not be too bossy. So the other thing about, do you want to say some of the traits for you as a firstborn?
I'm really anxious, and control is a really big thing. So
Okay.
like, I think I'm more of a perfectionist than my brother, and I like having things like feeling contained almost.
Okay,
So,
all right. What are the boundaries? What are the limits? What are we doing? What are the perimeters of discussion?
Exactly, and I was always very like methodical. Like this room, like if I was going to reorganize a room, I would measure the dimensions and all the things that I'm putting in, so then I know that that's going to fit, and that's not necessarily the same way that my brother would approach it. He would just move shit around until that looks okay.
Whatever, next year I'll get to that. Yeah. As the firstborn too, they talk in here about class differences, and I think they're very wise what they say in here about culture and class differences. So in working class families, often if the first, because I've been researching this all my life in a playful way, right? Because I'm 60, and I think I started learning about that when I was in my early 20s. You know, you're like, oh wow, sibling relationship. I hadn't thought about that, but that we like to be organized. We like things to have that perimeters. I have in a class situation, like working poor people, my mom was often gone all day doing things or working, and so was my father. So I have memories of being, you know, I had to make sure we got to school or got home from school, or we got the laundry done, or we got something to eat, or you go to your room and clean your room, or this has to be fixed or tidied. And so I have that feeling of being a sort of a facilitator too.
Or like another honorary parent almost.
Exactly. And then that has consequences, they say in here and elsewhere, for we often, whatever your relationship in sibling and gender stuff is, that you are sometimes or disproportionately likely to wish that in relationships. So if I was the firstborn and I've been accustomed to bossing my 2 brothers around, I'm going to be happiest if I have someone who is, let's say, who had an older sister who was a firstborn and who likes being bossed around. I'm not sure that's true, but I have had partners or sweethearts who said I was bossy. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm stubborn. I'm not necessarily bossy, but when I have an idea and I think that that's a really good idea, you're going to be hard pressed to change my mind.
Okay. All right. So reflect on that. I just want to be very brief about this video. they talk in here about so reflecting on where you are in the birth order. So if you have a family in front of you, you want to be reflecting on that in terms of the kids in the family. What are some of the traits you would use in a standard kind of way or a template kind of way? What traits might you expect with each of the kids? Mm-hmm. And then are the parents in a matched sibling relationship to what they were as a kid? And we want to remember, we've talked about intersectionality, we've talked about class, we've talked about culture, race, ethnicity. All of these things are just one more variable in a big, big, big story. And having a family in front of you, if the more you can raise their consciousness about what might be some of the things that are influencing them, the better. You're a teacher sometimes in these roles. You're encouraging them. Oh, so you say your wife is bossy. Oh, okay. Well, just out of curiosity, where are you in the sibling order, right? Knowledge is power, and the more you can give people power, the more that they can figure out ways to either accept these traits in their partner or negotiate them differently. And the same with the kids. If in a previous video I talked about how mothers would come to me and say, my daughter is bossy, she's this, she's that, and then to reframe it and say, oh, so she's a leader, oh, so she's an independent thinker, oh, so she's learned from her mother how to stand up for herself. That's a complete reframe, right? The mother is, in that kind of a story, is worried her kid is going to be rebellious and fly off into drug land or some kind of wild, be a biker chick or something, right? No, your daughter is becoming all the traits you wished her to be. Mm-hmm. And you, oh mom, have to trust the process. If it's her firstborn child, it's a girl, and mom is worried, right? Educating her, oh no, firstborn daughters are like that. That's okay, right? That's okay. That's who they are. Let it go. It doesn't spell catastrophe down the road. It's just who she is. And on the other end of the babies, right? The baby of the family often wants to be protected and guided and nurtured and those kinds of things. So a mother could, or a father could look at their kids and say, let's say this is the third or fourth kid, right? They go, oh, this kid has no ambition. They don't set goals. Why can't you be like your older sister? Right? And that was the case in my family. Like I pretty much, I didn't always know what I wanted to do, but I always knew I wanted to go to school. I would like to get education. I had some kinks and curves where I had to go earn money and pay for my well-being and escape uncomfortable situations. But I always knew that if I could get an education, I could control my life and make choices and be empowered. So strong work ethic. There was a lot of things going on. But my youngest brother, for a long time, felt really lost about where he wanted to go in life. And interestingly, when he finally did land on his feet, he became in the Navy, which to me sounds like hell. That would be one of my personal hells, to be constantly bossed around and told what to wear, what to do, even how to walk.
How to think.
How to think. I would end up either killing myself or blowing up something. I couldn't even take it for a week, I don't think, because that's just the opposite of me, to be told to do anything. But my youngest brother, who really was lost for a very long time, when he got it, he loved it, and he did fabulously, and he had a friendship network, and he was told what to do, and he was, even you're told, he worked in a submarine. And he adored it. He was really good at it. So, you're told, I would imagine, when to eat, how much to eat. Like, you're going to eat from 9 till 9:20 or something, right? It's the ultimate obedience game.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have tolerated that. But he lived it, and he actually retired, and he did, he's retired. He's younger than me by, I think, 10 years. And he retired because you put in 25 years or something and you can retire.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it worked out for him to be really glorious. It was a fabulous match between his birth order and
Career path?
His career path. So, like, what can you do with this knowledge? It could also be that kind of thing. Help people figure out if these are some of your traits as a baby of a family or a firstborn or a middle child. How are we going to match that up with your relationships or with your work roles? Or if you feel a disjuncture, it's not that you're a bad person, or like where I'm saying the moms were saying that their daughters, she's so bossy. Well, no, she's just telling you she's already figured out her routine, her goal, her plan, her activities, her schedule. You're just not obeying her. And it's okay, right? Mm-hmm. It's okay. Right? So helping people realize this is one more aspect of who they are. It's effective. In general, it is a pattern. And as they talk about in here, though, where things get a bit weird or a bit awkward is, in terms of the formula, is what we see now, and this is the likely kind of thing that you'll be seeing in your office, is people, let's say, I'll make up some story, a woman might have a baby when she's 16, and it's a girl, let's say, and so that's a firstborn child and maybe an only child, and then maybe when the mom is 35, she meets someone and wishes to have 2 children in a row. Boom, boom, right? So now the firstborn and only child is actually now a step sibling with 2 people, right? And these 2 people, the firstborn here, will have some of those traits of the firstborn.
Because by the time that the initial firstborn is
she's
they're already out of the house.
Yeah, she's 15 or 16 now, or she's formed herself, her identity, and her profile in a way has been formed. Mm-hmm. She feels herself a mini adult, and there was her and mom. It was a family of 2.
Yeah.
Right, and now over here suddenly it's a family of 5. There's the 2 other kids and the spouse now.
So your role in that family completely changes.
Completely changes. And this is a very common thing these days where people have a second relationship. Let's say, I don't want to say married because that puts us back in the legal things again. People have a major relationship and a child comes into that life, and then another major relationship and a child or children come into that life. You also have a very common story where reconstituted families, they're called sometimes, a divorce, and then they reconfigure in a new family. So you have, let's say, mom has 2 kids from the previous relationship, dad has 3 kids from the previous relationship.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that.
And they have 2 kids together, and by now almost one of the kids is an adult, so there's a grandkid, and there's this massive mashup sometimes
of the family network
of who's who and where in what order, and or another common one you hear nowadays is, this is more for dads, that dad was kind of not involved with the, like where mom, this first story I told you, mom has a baby and there is a biological dad, but he's kind of intermittently involved with the kid. He doesn't live with them, he lives somewhere else, right? But as he matures, and so now he's 30 and his kid is 10 or 12, he may feel more comfortable spending time with the kid now than he did when the kid was a little baby, because men as a collective group have still not been so socialized to spend time with little babies and toddlers, right?
Yeah, it's not usual that a 13-year-old boy is going to babysit, but it's usual that a 13-year-old girl will.
Right, exactly. We've still been very much socialized according to gender roles around care and tenderness and all that stuff. So there's, I've seen a lot of stories, and it may be more working class dads, I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time with middle class and super rich people, and neither will you as a social worker have them in general as your clients. But working class dads, often because they haven't been socialized to do that care work, you know, that sort of blue-collar, rough, you know, bravado, false masculine bravado. But then also they may still be, when they're, if the girl, the mom was 16 in the story I told you, and the dad was, let's say, 18. As an 18-year-old male, he may not really know how to manage those responsibilities, right? Like, assuming they don't legally marry and bond, but he's still somehow in the child's life, right? I've seen where when the kid gets to be 10, 12, 14, dad wants to start spending more time because it feels more comfortable. Oh, we could go dirt bike riding. Oh, we could go play baseball. Oh, we could go to camp. Oh, we could go fishing or hunting, right? So dad kind of reappears. And then there's a whole readjustment of energies around that too. Dad might be now 30 and maybe he has a spouse who has 2 kids, right? So you can end up in all these strange configurations. Well, not strange, but let's say non-standard of the imagined heteronormative nuclear unit, right? And one of the wonders we can bring to these stories, I think, is the whole thing where we've talked about we're not basing this on law and we're not basing it on biology, we're basing it on affinity and affection.
And that, I actually had a question. So, is there any research on like what the, I guess like the familial relationship is, or the impact of having like an inconsistent parent? So like you said, like the absent father, where he spends the first like 10 years away and then he starts hanging out with him a lot. Like, does it affect the relationship a little bit differently? Like, does the attachment, I guess, like using attachment theory?
Well, yeah, attachment theory, I think if I remember some of the stuff around attachment theory, it suggests that there's 3 kinds of attachment theory. One is ambiguous attachment, one is wholesome attachment, one is...
Well, isn't it like anxious avoidant?
Yeah, okay, yeah. She's got this. Again, with every story, this is only one glimpse. You've got a family in front of you, you've got some kind of struggle or issue or conflict that they've appeared for, right? And in general, if it's working class families, which is who in general will be your clients, you'll have in front of you, let's say in social work they used to call these presenting issues. So what do people throw out as their first problem? Right? Oh, my kid's gotten kicked out of school because he's fighting, or my wife just got arrested for drunk driving and she had the kid in the back seat of the car, or dad punched mom and the police came, right? Like, so those are the kind of stories that we come into. So in general, you want to deal with whatever the crisis of the moment, right? There's always that short-term stuff and then longer-term stuff. This kind of, let's say, sibling in the life cycle, that might be more in general in the longer-term stuff, the enrichment, the depth, the helping people come to a fuller, deeper humanity of themselves, right? I would believe that in general, that if either parent has been missing or absent for a long time, there's going to be ambiguous attachment. There's going to be, let's say, anxiety around trust. You know, you disappeared and now you reappear and maybe you're going to disappear again, right? Part of that would depend on how the mom managed it. So I'm taking a stereotypical story there. But still, statistically, we know, if you look at across all of Canada, if you have single parents, way disproportionately it's female. There are some males who are single fathers right now, but it's still way disproportionately. I don't know, I'd guess 80% or something like that. It's still female, right? And so you have disproportionately the issue of poverty, because female-led households are still way more likely to be poor. Yeah. Okay? So that attachment and anxiety, if mom has to move every 3 months or 8 months or 2 years because she's behind with rent, or she's chasing that new job, or, you know, all this sort of chaos in her life,
that's just going to compound that.
It's going to compound, exactly. But if you have the other kind of imagining of the single mom, let's say there used to be a show called Murphy. She was a very successful professional, and later in life she got pregnant and she had a child, and I don't remember where the dad was in the story, but he wasn't available, right? So if everything else in the kid's life, he's got a beautiful home, he's got good food in the fridge, he's got a stable life, mom has explained to him, you know, you were a very, very wanted child, and mom loves you, and grandpa and grandma and cousins and aunties, and right, if all of that is there, then the role of the dad is kind of a bonus, right?
Okay.
It's not a vital, right?
Mm-hmm. It's more of an addition rather than
right, an
like
addition, a bonus factor, 2-for-1 sale or something, right?
Yes.
It depends on so many variables. So I don't want to put in a place, because we have to be careful too to say, we don't want to say, oh, a single mom led households will these kids are all going to have all this anxiety. And there used to be that stigma and stereotype, if you're a child from a single mom family, you're going to be an addict, you're going to be violent, you're going to be fail at school. And there was a whole, for centuries, there was a lot of stigma.
You're going to marry the first man that gives you any attention.
Right.
You've got daddy issues.
Right. So we don't want to go that far, but it's one question to ask, right? With every family in front of you, every person in front of you, to be pondering that and to empower them with knowledge. It gives them tools to make decisions. And often the biggest gift you give clients is just help them reframe things, right? It's like that story I told you of the mom who, my daughter doesn't listen to me and I'm so worried she's going to get in trouble. And then when you start unpacking it, well, she goes to school all the time. She's not missing any classes. She's doing well in school. She's on a hockey team. She's on a football team. She's healthy and strong, and so she doesn't clean her room, close the door, right? Like sometimes you reframe it, and if mom can say, yeah, now that you say that, who cares, right? Or my daughter doesn't care about grooming issues,
You're almost like de-escalating it, because at that point, by the time that they've got to you, they've catastrophized that. That's the issue that they're presenting to you. So that's the biggest thing on their mind. So yeah, you giving them a way to positively frame it can de-escalate it to a point where they can see a little bit more clearly.
Right, and the diversity of humans, right? Many times parents, and this is one of the influences, the sibling relationship, the sibling roles, all of us, we wish to duplicate what we're familiar with, right? So if when I was a 14-year-old, if my mom insisted that I leave the house groomed a certain way and that my skirt matched my blouse and that I conduct myself as a lady and I not stay out alone with boys and, all that kind of thing. So now, because of the feminist movement and a million other variables, girls now could be anything at all, right? From football players to scientists
that actually get credit for their science.
Right, they could be doing anything. They could be excited about being a gardener or a landscaper, right? So sometimes mom has, or dad, I disproportionately, as I said in another video in my private practice, I had moms coming to me, right? Not dads.
They can be hindered by their own worldview.
Right, yes, exactly. So if I was the firstborn and let's say I have 2 boys and then I have a girl, right? So in my upbringing as a firstborn, I expect her to get focused, get organized, have goals, set plans with your day planner. You're 7 years old. You guys should have a day planner, right? Because I'm firstborn. But if my daughter is the thirdborn, and she's kind of like, yeah, whatever. My 2 older brothers are taking care of stuff for me. It's like fun and cool, right? Like what? Just change the channel. I want to watch TV, right? She's a little bit more laissez-faire about everything going on around her because she trusts the universe. She doesn't have to control it. So the conflict there, for example, might be between mom being a firstborn and maybe working class, rose up working class, and then mom is now, let's say, middle class, and her daughter is the thirdborn. You could see how mom would want to pull her a certain way, right? Versus saying, it's okay, mom, right? She's a thirdborn child. She's a middle class family, because we do change. I was brought up very poor, and I still will, like, my husband would always joke, you've got like 10,000 pens in this house. Why do you need 10,000 pens? And I would think, well, why do I need 10,000 pens? Well, what if something happened and then we had no money and then I couldn't even afford pens? Also, if they run out, I have to consciously say, I can throw this pen away. But my urge as a working class person is maybe I can get a couple more words out of it, or maybe if I like put it in hot water, the ink would. I don't want to just throw it away.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of like when you're
Hoarding.
Well, there's hoarding, but like you don't have the luxury of being able to go out and buy things whenever you want if you're poor. So hoarding things makes sense if you consider that there's a good possibility that you can afford this now, but you won't in a month or a week.
That's right. You get what you can if you work in shelters or you work with kids in group homes. One of the things you'll often see when they first come in is they hide food, right? Which is both kind of sad, but it can again lead to conflict. They hoard, where let's say there's a dozen people in the room and you've put out a dozen muffins and there's one muffin for everyone. Some people who've been in desperate situations will be tempted to take like 6 muffins, put them in a baggie and hide it in their bedroom in their drawer, right? So if you see people doing stuff like that, you know they've experienced desperation somewhere in their life, and your strategy would be to not punish them for that, but to just take note of it and next time have 18 muffins and it'll take away. Similar to an animal, if you've had a cat or a dog that's been completely stray and feral and troubled, they overeat, right? And then after a while it levels out. You just so
they need to see consistency to know that there's going to be food.
Exactly. So the sibling relationship with each person in front of you, if you have a family in front of you, part of what you can, and that's also I suppose, if there's a crisis issue, of course you deal with the crisis issue. Short term, there's a whole difference between crisis stuff, safety, food, basic resources, basic plans, there's that stuff in a shelter or a crisis center or the hospital, so there's crisis. And then the sibling stuff, I would say, is more the depth and helping people prepare for future situations, and also sometimes just reframing it.
Yeah.
And giving them permission to let it go and help them practice ways to let it go. Your daughter is a firstborn, she's a leader, and so she's defiant with you. She's got oppositional defiance disorder. There's a label for this now.
I have no idea.
They used to be called little. She's acting like a little bitch, but now there's an actual label for it.
I was gonna say my mom just went for the curse words. I have nothing to tell you.
But there's a diagnosis now, and it means rebellious. It means oppositional defiant disorder, I think is what it's called. And when I read it, it's just like, okay, she's a firstborn. She's a bitch. She's like a bold person. She's a leader.
What dad wrote this?
Yeah, exactly. Some middle class dad, exactly.
He's sitting there. Why is she not listening to me?
Yeah. So this chapter, I'm going to jump now to sort of the end of life. So we want to talk about order in the family, when you have a reconstituted or reconstructed or reestablished family, and ponder how does that all fit together. And then here's where it often comes up again in terms of social work practice, is later in life when mom or dad has Alzheimer's or is ill or needs to be cared for in a substantive way. So where this often comes up again, and also all the variables intersect. Remember that, right? So let's say firstborn, we're overemphasizing firstborn because there's 2 of us, and Tuva is a middle child, so we're just going to leave her out there in the middle somewhere. That's what the middle child often does, is kind of goes with the flow, right? But we're going to lead this, so where it can become a trouble again, or where it ends up in a social worker's office again, is later in life, right? And then sometimes those things that the siblings have had kind of set aside for 20 years or 30 years, all of a sudden can flare up again. So I'll make up a story and I'll use my situation. So I have 2 younger brothers, and if all along I've been the firstborn, the leader, the bossy one, the person who told them it's your turn to do the dishes, it's your turn to shovel the snow, And they've sort of had to obey me, but they also were resentful sometimes, let's say. And now we get to a time where mom and dad are in their 60s or 70s, and constant decisions need to be made and support has to be offered. So are we going to sell the camp? Nobody's taking care of the camp. The roof is caving in. Someone has to either go in there and fix it all up and get it ready to sell, or sell it as it is, or just let it all cave in, or what, right? There could be the temptation to always put that on the firstborn again, especially if she's female. You know, firstborn daughter will go and talk to mom, we'll go and talk to dad, we'll go look at the camp, we'll talk to the real estate person, we'll talk to the roofing repair person, we'll set this up, we'll set that up, we'll do this, we'll do that, right? And the two brothers will kind of go with that flow, let's say, right? Until there's some decision made that they don't like. So let's say oldest daughter says, okay, I've got the 6 assessments for the roof, I've got the real estate agent, I've got this, I've got that, I've got it all documented, here's the 3-month plan, blah, blah, interest rates, and we sell, and down payment, and blah, blah. And one of the brothers says, no, I want to keep the camp. I think that should stay in the family for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And the oldest is like, okay, yeah, well, you didn't do any of this work or any of this research or any of this activism. You didn't dialogue with mom or dad, but now you're suddenly showing up. And you want to say, no, we're keeping the camp. Right? So that's where you can have these kind of stories get very volatile, right? Very conflictual. You could have something like that, or something even more intense, like mom and dad are in their late 60s. Dad has had a heart attack and he's very limited in his physical energies and prowess. And mom has dementia or Alzheimer's, so she's kind of foggy. So life goes on, and then all of a sudden, mom almost burns the house down because she put something on the stove and forgot it. Boom, mom's hands are scalded, and she's in the hospital. And you get called. Oldest daughter, 2 brothers, what are we going to do? Right? Because mom's hands, she can't cook anymore now for the next month or 2 months because her hands are scalded.
The woman's going to be immediately delegated to her position and to fill those roles.
Right. We don't want to fall back into gender stereotypes. We don't want to collude with that. We want to be better than that. We want to be progressive. And we want to explore the truth of that family too. Because you can, if the 2 brothers have gotten off all these years with not doing any care work, right? You know, they just show up at Christmas, Thanksgiving, Mother's Day. They show up on Mother's Day with flowers. They show up on Thanksgiving and they get supper fed to them. They show up on Christmas Day and they get presents and they get supper fed to them. That's been how it's been. We might be revolutionary in saying to them, hey, it's your turn to step up. You could do this. You can be a caring person and a tender person. And maybe we could take turns here. We, the voice of social work, could be saying, in your family, there's 3 people. There's 30 tasks that need to be done. How are we going to put 10 tasks on each of you and get that sequenced? And don't be thinking the oldest daughter has to do it just because she's a girl. Because, hey, she's like 50 now. The girl shit's not going to work anymore. All 3 of you are adults. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. We've already established that you're capable. Now let's get past this.
Right, exactly. So we can invite them into doing that kind of stuff, but at the same time, if they've been saturated in traditional masculinity, they won't step up necessarily. So we can invite, we can encourage, we can talk about fairness, we can do all kinds of things, but sometimes the actual, mom is in the hospital, her hands are all band-aids, who's going to pick her up? She's being released from the hospital on Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Who's picking her up, right? So if they don't show up, and the oldest daughter does show up, right? So some of that stuff, we want to look at the whole thing, class, race, age, culture, religion, previous crises in the family, who handled what. Still disproportionately, that's how that story will unfold. The oldest daughter, maybe the second, if there's a second daughter, and maybe last will be the boy, the man, right? And he may say, well, I've got a job, and we have to say, well, your sister has a job too, right? Oh, Yeah, but I've got responsibilities. Well, your sister's responsibilities too, right? You may,
But I make more.
right. You can't. So we might be the person who's, let's say, a little bit of a disruptor there, and taking away or inviting him to reassess his male privilege, right? Right. So all of this stuff intersecting so on later in life, this is where it is most likely to end up in your hands as a social worker if you're a hospital social worker, or housing, subsidized housing, those kind of things, because all of a sudden grandma is, let's say, poor and she has 3 kids. Somebody has to help him sell the house, move, or if she's been in a dumpy apartment for a long time, now she might need a wheelchair accessible apartment. She might need somebody to check in on her every second day to make sure she's taking her medications. So it can be very intense, and it can be an escalating intensity. So that, let's say that story, mom has burned her hands, and so they've been kind of okay, but now they need to be put into some kind of supportive care living, or else they're going to starve to death because he can't get food organized and so on. He's in a wheelchair, let's say, and mom can't use her hands. So who's going to go pick up food for them? Who's going to really, really practical, concrete, specific things? And we have to frame it in ways that also maintains respect for the parents, grandparents now, the elders, because you don't want to infantilize them or be disrespectful. And they may not want to be, I don't want my kids coming in my house and washing my bathroom. That's weird, right? Like the power shifts, the power dynamics, to figure out how to do all of this with respect and dignity, and do your best to get everybody in the sibling hierarchy to do their best. Sometimes I know of one story where the daughter took on everything, had to take on anything, nobody else stepped up, and then at one point she just got really, really fierce, and she said, okay, you will pay money. If you're not going to show up, I need you to, because I have to go from full-time work to part-time work, and I was making $80,000 a year or $60,000 a year. You pay me
what
I'm losing from the employment sphere. And that actually, in her family, that worked out, because the guys were like, I don't want to change mom's diapers. This is just not going to happen. I'm not going to go mop the floor. I'm not going to deal with dad's barfing, right? And she did all that, and it's intense work, intense. And so she just got really, really fierce and said, okay, bluntly. So that's, again, something we could facilitate as social workers. Say, okay, so your sister is stepping up and doing these traditional things. So if we're going to go with this traditional stuff, you make $60,000 a year. How about you, for the next 3 years or 5 years, you throw 20 grand at your sister then? Step up and be a man if you want to be a man. You can't have both ways. I'm going to be a man. I'm a man, so I can't change diapers. Okay, well, you're a man, so you can make money. So give us some money. Right? Mm-hmm. That can be a tough, bold situation, but the social worker could be the one to say, come on.
Yeah. Because, right? I mean, when it comes from a family member, that can be confrontational.
For sure. For sure. And also if they've been, with the gender dynamics and that kind of a story, they may think, well, her work is worth nothing anyway. She's just a girl. Right? Like they have been cultured to be dismissive.
Yeah.
Right? Well, this isn't, if you've ever had to change diapers on an adult and you've had to mop up vomit and urine, this is work. This is intense. And most people would much prefer going and doing roofing or, I don't know, other things that get paid in the public sphere. Mm-hmm. This is heartbreaking and intense and exhausting. So if you've got a sibling who's going to do it, give them some money. Yeah. Another strategy is sometimes you can say, okay, well, when they sell the house, because sometimes that's the only asset that anybody has, is their little house on the edge of town or something. So when the elders sell that house, that let's say, because we're working with this sort of theme, is that the oldest daughter, when the house sells, she gets 1/3 of the money from that house, or she gets half, or because she did do the care work for 3 years or 5 years. So that, again, could be the kind of thing a social worker has to step in and offer as an alternative, sort of almost like a mediation. Conflicts can arise in sibling relationships about the money when somebody dies, the assets, how will they be distributed. There's a lot of ways that end of life can be really intense. And ideally, if everybody talked about these things before they became a crisis, like before mom scalds her hands because she's kind of foggy brained, right? If 3 years before that, in an ideal world, the whole family sat down and said, okay, it's a natural thing, mom and dad are aging, how can we distribute the work and care and love for these people and the material resources that we have available to us, and access all the best resources of the community, like in this community we have Gateway, which is an elder place, or across the street here for Indigenous elders there's subsidized single bachelor apartments, but it's subsidized for Aboriginal or so on. That would be the ideal, and that's what we would hope for, but I would guess that most of the time it becomes crisis oriented, and then all of a sudden a whole network of people needs to be brought in, and ideally brought in really quickly. Mm-hmm. So, are there any other things that you wanted to add about siblings?
No. I mean, it's cool, but I don't really have any questions.
Okay, I'll just conclude. They've got rules of thumb for the sibling relationships through the life cycle. And they've got 4 little suggestions here. Take a proactive stance about including siblings in assessment, whatever the presenting problem. Say to yourself, why not have a sibling session rather than thinking of including a sibling only when the client presents a sibling problem directly. So whatever the situation is, one of the things we can ask is, we talked about friends. Do you have any friends who could be pulled into this situation right now to help you to get on your feet again, or to help you with your grief, or to help you with parenting or whatever? So we talked about friends. But also we need to invite the clients to consider siblings. Do you have a sister or a brother who could help you with this transition that you need to make from being able to disabled, from being married and in a good middle-class home to now you've divorced and fallen into poverty? Or, there's all kinds of moments in people's lives where our task can be, you may not have ever reached out to your sister before or your brother before because you want to be independent, but this is a time of life when you do need to consider not just pulling in federal, provincial, municipally funded resources, public service resources, but what about your sister? What about your auntie, your friends, or everybody? Our task can be to remind people, and sometimes to make that call, because the person may say, there's no way I'm going to phone my sister and ask for help. Would it be okay if I called her? Ask a social worker, right? Because sometimes people are prideful, right? So when one sibling is bearing the weight of sibling caretaking for a parent or a disabled sibling, our task as social workers can be to help them improve the balance in the whole collaborative family. 3, assess and carefully challenge inequities in family roles and emotional and caretaking functioning of brothers and sisters. In general, sisters tend to be seriously overburdened and brothers to seriously underfunction in terms of meeting the emotional needs of the broader family. And number 4, validate the importance of sibling relationships and encourage resolution of sibling conflicts whenever possible. So that's the chapter on siblings. It's kind of a semi-visible aspect of our life, right? So that your siblings are kind of always there, but you kind of take them for granted maybe in an average person's life, except when a social worker says, well, what about your sister? What about your brother? Right? Mm-hmm. So it's a good chapter. Read it carefully and ponder how you can bring that dynamic into your sessions with your clients and your families, and ponder how it has influenced you as an individual and as a practitioner too, because you'll find yourself being more comfortable. I tend to be more comfortable if at different moments I've looked at my friendship networks and I'll have like 9 close friends and 8 of them are the firstborn daughter. Go figure. Right? Ponder how if even in a, this is kind of a less crisis-oriented dynamic, but sometimes in organizations too, if you work in an office and there's 5 other firstborn women,
Yeah.
and there's 3 babies of the family women, I could be, without reflecting on it, subconsciously, I could be more drawn to, these people are my peers, they're my leaders, and you're a bunch of babies. You can never make a decision. No, they're babies of the family, and that's okay. We don't all have to make all, it's okay if I make decisions, but they contribute to the team in a different way. Right? So reflect on it. Your friendship network, your peer network, your professional dynamics, the clients you work with, individually the clients you work with, or when you're working with a whole family. The sibling relationship, especially as we're all living longer too, right? That if you are in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and the only family you have left are your 2 sisters. You're 86, they're 84 and 83. The 3 of you really have a lot of shared memories and experiences that could be a place of harvest and richness and wonderment, or it could be a resource you're not accessing. Right? So thank you for coming to this video today on sibling relationships and family counseling.